Music and Parties 002, Tokyo Jazz Life 2, CD and record shops and musical instrument stores. 1. Prologue. In Tokyo Jazz Life Part 2, I've written about some of my favorite CD shops and record shops here in Tokyo selling jazz music, as well as stores selling instruments used in jazz. Finally, I wrote about a long-standing jazz club in Tokyo called Shinjuku Pit Inn, and its now defunct sister store, Roppongi Pit Inn, as well as some of my favorite jazz fusion music. 2. CD and vinyl record stores. Tower Records Shibuya, Tower Records Shinjuku. The first stop for anybody interested in getting their hands on not just jazz but any kind of music on CD or vinyl should be Tower Records Shibuya and the Tower Records in the Flags shopping center adjacent to Shinjuku Station, South Exit. If you're even the slightest fan of music, you could spend an entire day in either of these places. The staff that man the counters and wander the aisles on each floor are very knowledgeable about music, and with their help, you're sure to find most of the music you'd ever have business looking for between these two stores. Disc Union, Shibuya Jazz and Rare Groove Store. Disc Union, Shinjuku Jazz Store. Disc Union Jazz Tokyo, Ochanomizu. For the breed of jazz fan left unsatisfied by the offerings at Tower Records, I present to you Disc Union, specifically the Shibuya Jazz Rare Groove Store, the Shinjuku Jazz Store, and the Ochanomizu Jazz Tokyo Store. Pay your respects at these three stores, and even the most particular of jazz enthusiasts should be satisfied. 3. Musical instrument stores. Ishibashi Music, Ikebe Music, Musicland Key, Kurosawa Gakki, Yamano Music Rock Inn. The city of Tokyo is home to more stores specializing in musical instruments than anywhere else in the world. I often hear talk of professional musicians from overseas, not just jazz, but rock as well, buying instruments in Tokyo when they come to Japan for concerts. In fact, on a few occasions I've come across famous musicians trying out instruments at stores in Shibuya. Location-wise, the stores are for the most part centered in Shibuya, Shinjuku, and Ochanomizu. Instruments are alive, of course, so even when you look at a specific model from a specific manufacturer, each instrument makes its own unique sound. If the instrument hasn't been properly stored or maintained, the material may be warped, or there may be problems with the wiring. Always make sure to try the instrument out before buying. Side note, I personally like to check out the collection of basses at Ikebe Music in Shibuya and Kurosawa Bass Center in Shin-Okubo. In the near future, I intend to buy a Fender Jazz bass and a Hartke bass amp. 4. Epilogue. When Roppongi Pit Inn opened in 1977 as the sister venue to Shinjuku Pit Inn, it was a major event for Big Brother, who was a guitar brat, and his schoolmates. Around that time, guitarist brats could be divided into two camps, those into hard rock like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, or those into progressive rock like Pink Floyd and King Crimson. Then, around 1975, something new called jazz fusion or jazz crossover started coming out of the West Coast. Two guitar idols named Lee Ritenour and Larry Carlton captured the hearts of guitar brats in Japan, and what used to be a choice between a Fender Stratocaster and a Gibson Les Paul became more complicated with the addition of the Gibson ES-335 to the mix. Roppongi Pit Inn opened its doors in 1977. While Shinjuku Pit Inn was more swing journal, Roppongi Pit Inn was more ad-lib. After Lee Ritenour played the latter, the guitar brats were amped up more than ever. The following year, 1978, Watanabe Sadao's California Shower was used in a commercial for Shiseido and became a massive hit, heralding the arrival of the jazz fusion crossover craze for the Japanese public en masse. Roppongi Pit Inn went on to feature many of the best players on the jazz fusion crossover scene, such as Watanabe Sadao himself. Big Brother, being a guitar brat, eagerly went to those concerts, which featured guitarists like Watanabe Kazumi, Tanaka Masayoshi, and Yamagishi Jun, as well as bands like Noro Issei's Cassiopeia and Wada Akira's Prism. What's more, Roppongi Pit Inn was a place where musicians of all kinds played together in a variety of configurations. One of the key figures to come out of that was the professor himself, Sakamoto Ryuichi. Sakamoto formed the band Kirin along with the aforementioned Watanabe Kazumi, and he also played keyboards as part of the backing band for an unknown television commercial jingle composer named Yamashita Tatsuro. And of course, he would go on to form YMO with Hosono Haruomi and Takahashi Yukihiro. Killin Live, which is one of the best Japanese jazz albums ever, and Yamashita's popular live album, It's a Pop in Time, were both recorded at Roppongi Pit Inn. The last stop for YMO's inaugural concert tour in 1978 was also Roppongi Pit Inn. Until its closure in 2004 when the building was torn down, Roppongi Pit Inn was a shrine of jazz fusion crossover graced by wild, energetic performances from many of the best musicians of the genre. As for Big Brother, he didn't just go to Roppongi Pit Inn every week, he practically went every day. So often, in fact, that he eventually ended up working a part-time job there. At the time, before business hours and after concerts, musicians would congregate to hold impromptu jam sessions. Among the musicians was a certain pre-frame guitarist known for his tall, slender frame, and another certain guitarist whose trademark is his hat. They would play night after night for free, just for the sake of the music. Big Brother says it was invigorating to see them play. In fact, he says that watching them and being blown away by all their talent was what led him to give up on becoming a professional guitarist. Footnote 1. Lee Ritenour is an American guitarist from California that has been at the forefront of jazz fusion since the 70s. He is known for a sound that incorporates Brazilian rhythms. Footnote 2. Larry Carlton is an American guitarist from California. In addition to his solo work, he is also known for his work as a session musician, playing on recordings for musicians like Steely Dan, Joni Mitchell, and Linda Ronstadt. Footnote 3. Swing Journal, a monthly music magazine founded in 1947, covering chiefly jazz. Discontinued in 2010. Was an authority in the industry, with features like the Swing Journal Jazz Disc Award. Footnote 4. Adlib, a magazine founded in 1973 by Swing Journal. Covered jazz fusion, jazz crossover, AOR, black contemporary, etc. Also discontinued in 2010. Footnote 5. Watanabe Sadao is a saxophone and flute player from Tochigi, Japan. He was introduced to bossa nova while he was studying at Berklee College of Music in Boston. Since returning to Japan, he has remained active as one of Japan's most prolific jazz fusion musicians. He is also credited with helping spread bossa nova in Japan. Footnote 6. Watanabe Kazumi is a guitarist from Tokyo, Japan. He learned jazz guitar at the Yamaha Music School and has been active on the front lines of Japanese jazz since the 70s. In 1979, he formed Killing Band along with Sakamoto Ryuichi and others. Footnote 7. Takanaka Masayoshi is a guitarist from Tokyo, Japan. He started his professional career in the early 70s as a member of Sadistic Mika Band and as a studio musician. Footnote 8. Yamagishi Junshi, sometimes known as Jun Yamagishi in English, is a guitarist from Mie, Japan. He came onto the Kansai blues music scene in the early 70s and steadily built his career domestically. Since 1995, he has been based in New Orleans, Louisiana. Footnote 9. Noro Ise is a guitarist from Tokyo, Japan. He is best known as the guitarist and band leader of the Japanese jazz fusion band Cassiopeia. Footnote 10. Wada Akira is a guitarist from Tokyo, Japan. He is best known as one of the core members of Japan's first jazz fusion band, Prism. Footnote 11. Sakamoto Ryuichi is a pianist from Tokyo, Japan, who also works as a composer, arranger, and music producer. He got his start as a studio musician while studying at Tokyo University of the Arts. In the second half of the 70s, he began producing solo work while also playing in bands like Killing Band and Yellow Magic Orchestra. He is considered one of the few truly world-class Japanese musicians active today. Footnote 12. Yamashita Tatsuro, aka Yamatatsu, is a Japanese singer-songwriter from Bunkyo Ward in Tokyo. Heavily influenced by 50s doo-wop and 60s American pop and rock, namely the Beach Boys, he broke out onto the scene writing songs for television commercials. His summery pop songs are the perfect accompaniment for a drive along the Japanese coast. Music and Parties 002, Tokyo Jazz Life 2, CD and record shops and musical instrument stores. www.digtokyo.jp